it's just to say, it is a pleasure to welcome everyone here today to Jobs Foundation and SPL reception, where we celebrate Sheffield's power and potential through the Sheffield Innovation Spine. As CEO of the Jobs Foundation, a charity set up to champion business and its role to relieve poverty through jobs and training, I hope you can provide a suitable backdrop to the conversation tonight around innovation and the key it provides to unlocking people caught in a cycle of worklessness and deprivation. The Jobs Foundation has long been a champion of Sheffield, which our brilliant research director, Nick Tyrone, covered in our foundational report, 2 Million Jobs. And obviously, as Nick is part of the panel tonight, saw firsthand how central Sheffield's universities, businesses and local projects are in tackling poverty by creating jobs and offering essential training, particularly in the tech sector. We're incredibly grateful to all the businesses and business owners in Sheffield, including a few faces I can see in the room today, who took the time to speak with Nick and contribute to shaping his important research. Now, before passing over to the panel, I want to thank SPL and Spencer Pitfield, who has so brilliantly masterminded tonight's event, and is indeed in the hot seat, chairing this evening's discussion. Plus, another big thank you to HS Energy for kindly sponsoring today's event. And finally, a special mention to Ken Ross and RBH Properties, is that right? Who has been so essential to the Sheffield Innovation Spine and the community, talent and opportunity being brought together through that exciting scheme. So without further ado, I shall pass over to Spencer, and I hope you have a good evening. Thank you.
Georgiana, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. I appreciate it's a lovely evening and you're giving up your time to come and listen to a discussion about the Sheffield Innovation Spine. So thank you to all of you. A special thanks, I should declare this at the outset, I am from Sheffield. Sheffield is my home. Thanks to those of you who've travelled down today and are here, and perhaps some of you will be travelling back later tonight to Sheffield. Thank you so very much. So we're here, actually this is the second event today. We had a parliamentary luncheon, which was a great success. And we're very much thinking about and wanting to raise with you and with others the opportunities and where the Sheffield Innovation Spine has actually got to and where we hope it will go to in the future, so to speak. So it's my great opportunity to be the chair tonight, and I'm going to now introduce the panel. So on my immediate left, your right, Charlotte Thompson is here. Charlotte is the director of the Innovation Spine in Sheffield, and clearly we're here talking about the Innovation Spine. So Charlotte, thank you to you for being here. On my immediate right, Nick Tyrone. Georgiana has introduced Nick, well known to many of you, the research director at the Jobs Foundation, also known to you as a journalist, spectator, etc. To my further right is Ken Ross. Again, Georgiana mentioned Ken and RBH. Pennine Five is situated, this is a property, a rather large property with 5 different but connected campus buildings, a substantial entity right in the middle of the Innovation Spine. Ken, thank you to you for being here too. And then Dr. Chris Lowe. Chris, to those of us who are in Sheffield, will know is the CEO of the Sheffield Olympic Legacy Park, and he'll tell you about how well we did when the Olympics came to Sheffield, probably a bit later. So just to set the scene, important to set the scene, if you think about the Innovation Spine, and Charlotte will tell you more about the spine, the key thing for me as someone who cares about how we regenerate the city of Sheffield and how we do even better is that by creating the types of tech jobs that we're thinking about and developing innovation across the city, and many of you will know where Sheffield is, but I'm regularly here in London. People say to me, where is Sheffield? So there's a good start to know where we are. But the hope is that through the economic growth, the new companies that we drive forward, through the spine, clearly we're not only creating wealth and growth, but we're also creating prosperity for the wider city region. If you think about Sheffield, you will understand that it's quite a mixed picture. It's not unusual for big cities in the UK. On the one side, you have a part of the city which is doing extremely well, and as you move to a different part of the city, you will understand it has some of the worst deprivation, perhaps in the whole country. So it's a game of two halves in that respect. So hopefully that set the scene. We're thinking about how this innovation spine and things that the four partners, the two universities, Sheffield Hallam, Sheffield University, and then with the mayoral combined authority and with council colleagues, the City Council of Sheffield, how they work together to drive forward the things that really will add value and prosperity across the city of Sheffield. Charlotte, without further ado, over to you as the director of the Innovation Spine.
Thank you. So I thought I'd tell you perhaps about where, the why, what, where and how we are in the Sheffield Innovation Spine. So this was initiated about 6 months ago to have a 20-year vision to create the spaces and places for knowledge-led business to thrive in Sheffield city centre. And this came about due to a saturation of incubation and scale-up space within the city, which meant that a lot of our high-growth businesses were leaving Sheffield. So our objective is to make sure that we can retain our businesses, but also attract more business in. We've also got a lack of density of business. So a lot of our businesses have had to try and create spaces across the region. And what we want to do is benefit from density. So increase collaboration, connectivity, and create a better hotspot for being able to attract more investment into Sheffield City. This project was initiated by 5 partners, the South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority, Sheffield City Council, the University of Sheffield, Sheffield Hallam University, and Sheffield Tech Parks. So we have key anchor institutions that have backed delivering the Sheffield Innovation Spine. And as an economic and spatial strategy, it has been written in within the Sheffield Growth Plan and our development plan. The area we're looking at connects both university campuses, connecting the University of Sheffield right through to Sheffield Hallam and the train station. And we know from our companies that they want to be in the city, living, working, playing, and connected to our main transport hubs so they can get out and be travelling across the UK and globally to attract investment and clients. So where we've got to now in those 6 months is that we're building on our existing innovation hubs, which includes Pennine Five, and we are connecting that infrastructure to build upon that to make the case for investment in wider developments so that we can support the growth of these businesses. And those businesses align with our strengths, so everything from advanced manufacturing materials to digital and creative, and health and well-being, including our life sciences cluster. So we're trying to create those facilities that can support those businesses to connect and grow within Sheffield. So I don't know whether to perhaps expand upon that or perhaps go to questions, but this is really the start of the journey, and we're looking to engage real estate investors and those that want to be located in Sheffield to talk with us about how we can accommodate and grow on the momentum well underway.
Fantastic, thank you, Charlotte. So that's a great oversight of the Innovation Spine, and on my right I have Nick, who wrote the report 2 Million Jobs. And Nick, just to say, as someone who lives in Sheffield, thank you for coming to Sheffield. And of the 4 areas that you looked at, Sheffield was one of the, I suppose I would say this is one of the key areas. But it'd be really great to get your thoughts, having been to Sheffield, having seen how things sit on the ground, the complexities, the opportunities.
Yeah, there's so much to say about Sheffield. I spent a reasonable amount of time in Sheffield in 2024 and really kind of fell in love with the city, actually. And the first thing I'll say about the Jobs Foundation, we're a charity that is founded to champion business as a force of good, and that the jobs are the best way out of poverty. And the report I wrote, 2 Million Jobs, is very much about looking at how do we create the jobs that we need to, to really get the economy where we need to go. So I think one of the things to say about Sheffield, as you say, it's very complex. I mean, I think I remember doing a lot of desk research before I went, and everything's about like Sheffield poverty and Sheffield deprivation, and what you find is obviously, even at the time, I found it was very geographically clustered. You know, you have bits of the of Sheffield that are very socioeconomically deprived. Also, the fact that Sheffield really relies on the public sector more than a lot of British cities. So a good example would be so about a third of the jobs in Sheffield are in the public sector, which, to give you some idea of how that compares, like about 20% in Birmingham are public sector.
Big difference.
So it's quite profound. But I just want to get that out of the way to actually talk about how great Sheffield is and how amazing.
Well, I haven't paid him to be here. It's just could come later.
But so one of my first meetings in Sheffield when I went up was it was a chap who'd started his own tech company. He was a very young guy. He was like 23, 24. We got to talking. And again, I'd just come to Sheffield. I didn't know what to expect. We were sat in a cafe that was actually like something that I would expect in sort of like London Soho or New York's East Village. Very hipster. It was lovely. It was like, oh, wow, okay.
You're all welcome to come. Good.
And so I asked him, I said, you know, how's things going with so basically, he told me that he struggled to get the VC, the venture capital, in London, and then he said, "Well, I just decided to get on a plane to Boston and try and find it." And I said, "Well, how did that go? Did you know someone in Boston?" "No, I didn't know anybody." I said, "Okay, so you just went." And so he cold called people in Boston and managed to come away with a couple $1 million to start this venture of his.
Incredible.
And I said to him, I said, "How's it going so far?" And he was very sheepish. He was very he's like, I thought, oh God, okay. So, well, we've only turned over a couple $1 million this year, but it will be $5 million next year. And you know, that just wasn't what I was kind of expecting. I don't know what I was expecting, but that was an amazing sort of intro to Sheffield, as it were. And then obviously I got into, from there, Tom was his name. He had worked at the Sheffield Technology Parks, run by a great guy named Tom Wolfenden, who I'm sure all of you who will know about Sheffield will know about Tom. Amazing guy, and the stuff that he's doing in terms of shepherding small businesses and startups in the tech field is absolutely amazing. And I think one of the things that I thought was when I was growing up was this kind of rub against of the traditional steel, you know, the kind of that idea of Sheffield and this new idea of tech. I think one of the things I found that was really interesting to me was actually at the best level, they really complement each other. What I mean by that is actually what you're finding is a lot of the old tech companies that have, a lot of the old steel companies that have managed to survive have done so. Basically, they're not competing on price anymore because price, that's done. That's going to be done by something overseas. What they're competing on is quality. So the things that they can do, and actually the overlap between the tech sector in Sheffield, because that's what's kind of enabling them to do that, because they can interface with the tech companies and the steel companies, and when that really works, that really works. And I think, you know, seeing more of that would be amazing, because I think that's clearly where the steel industry in Sheffield, I think, is going to be on quality, not price, and so the fact that, yeah, exactly. So the fact that you've got like the tech companies there. The other thing I would say is you've got the two universities, and they felt sort of embedded in the whole city in a way that I actually hadn't thought about before I come there, because you think, okay, well, it's great. You've got, you know, people that are there, and you've got these universities. I think the biggest thing, there were so many entrepreneurs that I met who they run a business, and particularly in tech, actually, who run a business in Sheffield. And let's say they have got like 15, 20 employees. They're doing something, who weren't originally from Sheffield. So their whole, you know, entrance into Sheffield. Like, and some of them said, I didn't actually know where Sheffield was before I came to the university.
Yeah,
and
that's not uncommon either.
But I sent out all these applications, and I got into Sheffield University or Hallam, and they ended up going. When they graduated, they found that they said, "Well, actually, my whole entire network is here.
Yeah.
That's everyone I know really in my adult life is here. So why don't I try and start a business here?" And so many businesses I found were like that. And so that was another thing I found was just, those two universities I think are really, really big. I've taken a lot of time, so the one thing I want to close on is there's a great deal of talk, I think, in Britain about, trying to create a Silicon Valley in Britain. And generally it focuses on London, Cambridge, Oxford. I would like to just sort of make a case for a Manchester, Leeds, Sheffield. And I think that actually the only thing that's really stopping that is the transportation infrastructure. If the transportation infrastructure was there, I think that would really take off because actually it's all there. Having seen the tech industries in all those cities. So I'll close there.
Nick, thank you. So just to touch upon two things there very quickly. The first is if you do come to Sheffield and you've never been to Sheffield, you will visit the greenest city in the UK.
It is lovely.
It is quite incredible. It is absolutely lovely.
Because you're right there, the
next to the peaks, and it's beautiful. The second thing, just to further highlight, and I saw that there was quite a lot of response in the room to this, we have desperate infrastructure transport issues in our region. Absolutely desperate. If you spend year after year not investing in the north, then you're going to always be behind, and as a result of that we really do struggle. But I love the idea of a Manchester, perhaps Sheffield in the middle and a Leeds at the top. Innovation Spine. Nick, thank you. So I'd like to bring in Dr Chris Lowe. So Chris, the Legacy Park, our Olympic Legacy Park, you are the CEO. Your thoughts? I'm particularly interested to know, you will have all sorts of different things to say, but I'm interested to know about the power of partnerships and collaboration. But over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Spencer. Hello, everybody. I don't normally talk about the Olympics in sessions like this because I don't have very much time. But I think it's important today because I'm looking out on a number of political colleagues who I think may well have encountered the founding father of the Sheffield Olympic Legacy Park, which was Richard Cabourn, who was the sports minister in Tony Blair's government. And the reason I talk about him is that I met Andy Burnham recently and he said, Richard, he's a force of nature. And that just sums him up. And he's a Sheffield MP, or he was. And he took what was a brownfield site, 80-acre site, near the M1, near Meadowhall, for those of you who've ever visited that lovely place. And he said, we can turn this into something special. Total brownfield site. And because of his links, he was able to persuade Sebastian Coe to give it Olympic status. So it is the only Olympic legacy park outside of a host city in the world. And we have a certain element of justification for that because it's also the home of Team GB, boxing, para-badminton and para-table tennis. So there is a sporting heritage, but it's transitioned into something. In fact, I'm going to challenge Spencer.
Oh dear, I knew I said something wrong.
Everybody's been talking about 4 partners today, 2 universities, City Council and Mayoral Authority.
Yeah.
The 5th, and the driver of a lot of innovation that doesn't always get recognised, is the NHS. So we have an NHS partnership on the site. We've just started building a £25 million centre for child health technology with the Children's Hospital, Google, BT, the universities, all sorts of partners are involved. And that is supercharging what we're trying to do. We're trying to develop this part of the region. And I always have to disclaim the Sheffield thing because I get quite a lot of money from the South Yorkshire Mayoral Authority. So it's a South Yorkshire resource. And the Mayoral Authorities, for anybody who works closely with them, are becoming much more powerful, much more resourced, but also expectations are growing. And that is a key part of what we're trying to do. We're trying to raise expectations within the region and the city. And interestingly, it's not just the local people who are getting their aspirations raised, it's the people who work in these sites and seeing the opportunity. I'll give you one example. So this Centre for Child Health, which will open next spring, we recently ran a business accelerator programme we advertised globally, and we got 12 companies who wanted to get involved in developing child health technologies. And just a brief technical aside, a child health technology is not a small version of an adult one. It has to be a dedicated development. And then you can expand it into the adult market, but you can't easily do the other way around. So these companies were all interested in that challenge. So they came along to the park. They've been working with clinicians, with academics, with technologists, but they've also been working with children. And what we have on the site that's made this place very different and makes it a complicated story to tell, but a vibrant place to be, is we have a school, a 2 to 16-year-old school, and we also have a university technical college, the vocational colleges that Kenneth Baker brought into existence for 14 to 18-year-olds. So the technical college ran a competition for their students to become reverse mentors to the 12 startups that we attracted into this child health innovation pipeline. And that gave them a real opportunity to get involved, to see their opportunities, their aspirations raised. But the most intriguing impact was the feedback we got from the startups. Their phrase was, it was unfiltered advice they gave us. Because they said, no, that just won't work with a child or a young person. You've got to do this, you've got to do that, you've got to work with us. And so there was a real sense that this place that we've created that with co-located partners, public and private, was starting to create a dynamic that maybe could be rolled out elsewhere, but there was breaking down. And, for years, I've been involved now as chief exec for 4 years. When I came on board, we were starting to build this. And for anybody in the audience who's sold a vision, you're a bit like that at the beginning, thinking, I think this will work. And then when it starts to work, and it goes beyond what you envisaged, it's quite amazing. And that's what's happening on this park. And so it bookends, in effect, the innovation spine with Charlotte's work, and it's creating the opportunity, I think, I'll give you the words of Dame Angela McLean, the chief scientific advisor to the cabinet. She came up and she said, you know what, Chris? You're trying to achieve, and you're succeeding, 3 of the 5 government missions. At that point, I didn't even know what the missions were, but she said, health outcomes, I thought, yes, I see that one, opportunity for all, and economic growth. And then a month later, Stephanie Peacock, the Minister for Sport, came, and she said, Angela's wrong. You're delivering on 4 of the 5 government missions because you're also keeping young people out of the county drug lines because of the basketball academy that you've created on site for excluded kids. And I'm just constantly reminded, and I get people pitching to me all the time, that we've only just begun and that we need to set our ambitions way beyond what we've done so far. We've achieved a lot, but who knows where we could get to. And working alongside colleagues like Charlotte, it's an interesting and exciting time. And I can talk about investor interest and all the rest of it, but
Chris, thank you. So just very quickly to say that it's to those of you who are not from Sheffield, when I go back to Sheffield and I think about the advanced manufacturing park and the real high-tech business entities that are there just off of the Parkway, just off of the M1, halfway up the country, when I think about the great work that you are doing with the Centre of Excellence around child health, I think this is wonderful, but I also think at the same time, I'm worried that people don't know about this. And, the real test for me afterwards, when we can have a drink together, is for those of you who've never been to Sheffield, are you aware of these incredible things that are going on? And I think I'm speaking personally here, and then over to Ken, will have his own insights. Is that I think it's because, and I'm an incomer, so I'm from Kent, wherever Sheppey is, all those many years ago. But the reality is we're not terribly good at telling people in our sub-region the incredible things that we're doing. And perhaps as a starting point, we need to be more active. And this is why this is so exciting for me personally tonight, because we've spent today speaking with colleagues and listening and thinking about all of the things that we're seeking to achieve. And we're doing it not only for our sub-region, our city, but for the nation too. Ken, over to you. I'm really interested to understand a bit more about Pennine Five, about how the private sector can interface with the public sector. And from the other panelists, it's clear to me when you've got lots of different agencies involved and they all have a common mission but different command and control, if that's a good way of expressing it. How do we pull this together, and what is the place of the private sector to support these things?
Yeah, so it's an interesting point, and I'd just like to say thank you to everyone for coming this evening. One of the biggest things I think that we have in this country that gets in the way of real change is our election cycle. And you have people who come up with some good ideas, start thinking about how to implement them, and they may or may not be in a position to do anything about it shortly thereafter. And all that's happened during that time is the people that the ambition was there to change their outcomes, to change their environment, to improve their city, improve their offering, they're waiting yet again. And so for me, as a private investor and for my two business partners, we've been very much driven in cities where we can take control of a lot of that. And we'll drive forward and try and create an environment and hope to bring some other partners with us. Now, a very telling thing, and is there anyone from Liverpool here? Okay, I'm not knocking Liverpool.
That's a good start.
To give you, I would just want to paint this point. To give you an example, a few years ago, my business partner Simon was in MIPIM, which is the sort of property junta, supposedly it's work in the south of France. It was work. And Liverpool displayed 6 properties on the screen to promote Liverpool. Simon went up and introduced himself. No one knew who he was, but we owned 4 of those buildings. And we found it generally quite difficult to reach out in a meaningful way to other people, other significant stakeholders within cities. So one of the things which we've actually felt very excited about with Sheffield is that we've found people who are on the same page as us. They really are trying to make things happen. There isn't party political squabbling where people are trying to dismantle other people's work, but they're still somewhat constrained in trying to get that message out to other people, because we are kind of in a bubble here in Westminster. A lot of people don't ever go outside. If you go outside and you go to Sheffield, first time I went to Sheffield, I just arrived in this country from living in France, and I was a removal man. It was 1989, and I was moving some factory equipment for someone. I didn't come back to Sheffield for nearly 30 years. So I was in and out in a day, and that was it. And every time we've invested in the regions, we've probably been amazed that we're not competing with other funds from London. And that was because people weren't generally travelling to the regions. They weren't trying to find out about it. Today in the paper, one of the largest hedge fund in the world, they're talking about not being able to locate their 3,000 staff in the City of London. They don't even want to go to Canary Wharf. So to think, are we ever going to get their money up to Sheffield is a tall order. But what we have got is we have got some very motivated partners. The 2 universities, it's pretty incredible. I think you need at least 3 A's to go to either of the universities. So you've got 65,000 very bright students. We have the privilege of having Sheffield College as one of our tenants at Pennine Five, and again we're lucky that we have colleges in other parts of the country as tenants as well. And just seeing what they're doing in terms of embracing adult education, We're very aware that the South Merrill Authority wants them to focus more on technical side of courses. So again, that's great. So it's really building on the people we're seeing. We have half a dozen or so tenants who are university spin-out businesses, and that always sounds like they're quite small and they're quite conceptual. But some of these guys are world leaders in their technology. Their technology is moving data faster on microchips. One of the guys, we are trying to get them, not a tenant yet, they built the world's smallest quantum computer. So there's pretty amazing things happening in Sheffield. But Spence, you're right. We need to get the message out. We need central government to start thinking, what can they do to unlock the purse strings to give more autonomy into the regions? And with the South Merrill Authority, Pennine Five is based in the investment zone. All the money in terms of business rates stays within the South Yorkshire area. A bit more than 20%, which is the usual take, goes to Sheffield. The rest stays in the area. If we can see that money being spent in ways that encourages businesses in, and I absolutely appreciate the point about infrastructure. But if we spend and focus just on connectivity within those cities, rather than thinking, as you were, about connecting the three big cities up, Sheffield is the only one that's not a tier 1 investment city out of those three.
That's true.
So again, they're a bit of the weak partner at the table. They're a little bit at the mercy of Manchester, and Leeds is already a bit at the mercy of Manchester.
I agree.
There was a huge piece done around the mid-noughties promoting Manchester. So we've got to try and think of a way that we can help level that up within our own space. But we're really hopeful. We've hosted several dinners in Sheffield. They're all outside of working hours, and we have had the most incredible attendees, and that speaks volumes. Even tonight, you guys giving up your time on a lovely spring evening. It does speak volumes that people are there. They're very motivated to see things happen. We can't see what happened with Rolls-Royce and McLaren, where they thought it was going to get a lot bigger, a lot faster, and it sort of stalled. We need to build a momentum. We've definitely got some momentum now. We've got some of these tech businesses are coming in and they're bringing investment interest from outside the UK. If we can carry on capitalising on that, if we can help the universities upscale those offerings so that Sheffield becomes more sticky for the jobs. I have a son who's a nuclear scientist. His probably job route is not in the UK. It's absolutely shameful. 50% of the world's authorities comes out of the university he works for in nuclear, but his job prospects are probably either in China or in the States. So we have to think of ways to actually create those opportunities in this country to keep people there. Sheffield is it's not a blank canvas. It's a great working project, and we're very excited to be part of it.
Ken, thank you. So, Nick, I could ask you, I was touched by the fact that this startup company had to go to Boston to generate a relatively small amount of venture capital to get going.
All things considered, yes.
All things considered, and of course the times change, and maybe that's not the case
Absolutely.
now. But it's not an unusual picture for Sheffield and the North that when you're in that position and you're energetically looking to start something up, you just don't know where to go. And how do where are the agencies? How do you find the right routes to market where you're going to generate that little bit of support, which will be the incubator for something more? And, I'm interested to know about your thoughts with regards to government too. We have a new government. The North is a very important place for many of our colleagues. Now, how are things going to change, do you think, in the future?
So I think one of the things I really got, speaking to people across the country, it was amazing how much people get VC from the States. That's a very, very common thing across Britain. It not just in Sheffield, everywhere. Found that in Loughborough, found that elsewhere. A kind of, and actually the people I was speaking to, in a sense, it was a bit of a Darwinist thing, like as in the fact that they had they hadn't just gone to London and then given up. They've gone, actually, maybe we'll go to San Francisco or maybe we'll go to Boston. And they had got investment.
Okay.
And one of the things that I kept coming across, which I found interesting, was so many entrepreneurs told me that when they went to London, they would be told, well, you want to do this for $1 million or £1 million or whatever it is, or 200 grand or whatever the sum was. I'll give you half of that. To which the people would go, well, but all you're doing is wasting your money. I can't actually do it on that amount of money. Was that they never encountered that in America. Actually, most of the time in America, what they encountered was, can you really do this on $1 million?
We're going to give you a bit more.
Yeah. I'd rather give you a 1.5 if you can deliver. Like as in, I'd rather give you all the money that you need or nothing. Like basically, because what's the point? Like either this is going to take off and this is going to be something that whatever, in 5 years time we'll sell the IP to Apple or whatever it is, or however this ends up, or this crashes out. But at the very least, what I want to do is invest what I need to make it work. So that was a really big thing constantly. I mean, one of the interesting things I found just on a Sheffield basis was one of the things they kept saying is like, oh, it's about an hour away from London. That was the thing they kept saying. They basically...
Not on my most recent train.
Almost like it was a suburb of London.
Yeah. Okay.
That was a classic thing they would sell to the Americans constantly, all the time. Like you can get there in an hour and a half, 15. They go, really? Oh, well, that sounds all right, kind of thing. So that was a big thing. But yeah, how much they really had to get VC from America. That was a constant theme.
And how are we going to get more government money into the sub-regions? So we've touched on the mayoral authority. Our mayor, Oliver Coppard, has about 35 million to play with.
Yeah.
He spent some money recently on buses, quite a good thing if you want to connect people who are striving to find jobs across the city and the sub-region. Interestingly, just to say too, a bit of a plug for our airport. It's coming back. We were the only sub-region in the country that didn't have an airport. And so there's been a long campaign to get the airport back. But just very quickly, Nick, how do we get more money into South Yorkshire? What do we need to be saying to government? What's the quick?
Well, the quick thing. I mean, it's a really tough one. I mean, one of the things I really found, like traveling around the country, and there's big projects. Like my idea of Manchester, Leeds, Sheffield is a big project. I appreciate that, but genuinely, imagine for a second if you could like shunt to Manchester to Leeds in 15 minutes and Leeds to Sheffield in like 15 minutes, and that's quite futuristic. I get it, but like. If that was the case,
really
I think so many, particularly foreign investors, would go, well, now I don't have to choose between any of these places. I don't have to sit there and go, Leeds has this and it doesn't have this, and Sheffield might have this or I don't have this. Now it's like, well, this is like, we're just going to treat this like all one big city. And I think that would be completely transformative. But actually, one of the things is just, if I'm trying to scale that down, I just really think one of the big things that government can do is around transportation infrastructure. Was one of the things I kept running up against everywhere. If you went somewhere really poor, like Hartlepool, I covered Hartlepool in the report. I mean, one of the things that really cripples Hartlepool is its infrastructure is so bad. It's really hard to get into. It's really hard to get out of. To the point that the FE College, essentially, to run a functional apprenticeship program had to basically out of some other part of their apprentice, like they weren't getting it from the government, they just had to just pull from some other budget, run a bunch of minibuses so that people could like get to the place, because otherwise people weren't going to get there. What's going to happen? And this is a constant thing. We don't really have an infrastructure. I mean, again, one of the things I've run up against, I'll be brief, and I know you want to move on, but one of the things on the infrastructure, like just having done this project, I've really noticed, like, so I had a thing where I was doing a visit in Redcar, and then I had a meeting in Sheffield the next day. And I thought, well, a hotel in Redcar costs nothing. So why don't I just stay in Redcar and get back? But actually, genuinely, it was easier to go back to London and then get back up.
It's a sad indictment.
And I'm having that now. Like this week, I'm going to Bournemouth tomorrow.
Yes.
And then again, a similar thing, I'm going to Exeter the next day. So you think, oh, why don't we just stay out overnight? But actually, it's easier to get back to London. And anyway,
Yeah, thank
yeah,
you.
I just genuinely think that's a problem.
Chris, if I could just ask, because we touched upon earlier that the power of the two universities, the Legacy Park has a close connection with Sheffield Hallam University, but these are powerful organisations, huge number of students. Many of the students are like me. You arrive in Sheffield, you never leave. You meet your wife, you stay there for the rest of your life. Nobody told me that when I went to Sheffield, but so a bit of a personal moment. But thinking about the NHS though too, because Sheffield is peculiar. We have really high quality teaching hospitals, 5 clustered hospitals, an absolute centre of excellence. What are your thoughts about the 3 of those and their power to support the things that we're talking about with regards to the innovation spine?
Yeah, and I'm going to circle back to that, but just to point on your kind of quick, what sort of government funding is needed.
That'd be great.
Because it relates back to those parties. What is needed is the government funding has to de-risk things to leverage more. So we were approached by a VC partnership, and they said, if you can cornerstone this vehicle for us, we can generate 10 times that, crowding in private investment. So we're working on that with the Mayoral Authority and with Yvonne, who's in the audience, in the City Council. And so that, for me, the government funding isn't the solution, it's the key to unlocking the solution.
Oh, okay.
And that relates also to property as well, and more capital investment. So, and the key to getting that, and on what's attracted the VCs, I mean, I was approached literally by City of London partners who said, what are you doing? And I said, what do you mean? And they said, you've got innovation pipelines now across 3 or 4 verticals. And you've got VCs involved in each of those verticals, and they are supporting these startups. But you need your own dedicated investment vehicle for the park to exploit this opportunity, and also to leverage the opportunities for the public sector to take some stake in that as well. And that is a difficult ask of institutions that are heavily governed. So one of the things that we're working with NHS and universities on is what sort of governance structure can we use to leverage private capital in? I mean, literally, I won't name the hospital, but I said, look, we can get a few million in. And they said, we don't know where to put it. And I said, what do you mean? They said, we haven't got a budget line or an account that would take that money, no matter what we do with it, if it's private investment. So it's things like that, and it's kind of dreary back office finance conventions, but it's that kind of thing. If we can see transformations in the way that the government treats public sector bodies and their ability to generate private benefit as well as public benefit, then I think that's transformational, and that's the kind of work that we can do with those institutions that you're talking about. Because they're all literally next door to each other now on the park, and we're working on those mechanisms. Some of the mechanisms I can't talk about because they do brush right close up to current governance conventions. But we're determined to lobby government as part of this to say, you have to free up these structures, you have to almost create sandboxes for financial regulatory structures to leverage private capital in, because that's the solution. It's not public capital, it'll be private capital that makes the difference.
Chris, thank you. Charlotte, a thought for the future. So you're the new director of the Innovation Spine, and how do you see things as we move through the summer and into the autumn? What type of things are you thinking about to drive forward the Innovation Spine? And clearly we've talked a lot about partnership and opportunities. It seems to me often as if it's always complicated trying to bring stakeholders at slightly different speeds together, but there's a lot of energy and positive goodwill here today, and I know in Sheffield, to do this. How do you see the future, the short-term future?
So we're building on market momentum. We have still quite a small ecosystem in terms of the number of businesses we have, but we've had probably the largest increase in ecosystem value in comparison to any other core city in the last 5 years. And the level that we're seeing companies raise now, I think Flux raised 9 million in their Series A recently, and that's at Series A. And I think the level of ambition and growth within the businesses that we have got is incredibly exciting. So the approach that we've taken and will maintain is to be company-led, and we're being data-driven. So it's been really important to me that I understand how business cases are being formed for real estate and for business, and we provide you with the right intelligence to be able to drive the right spaces as we continue to grow our city centre. And so with that, we've been working with companies to understand, well, actually, what does the city look like and what do you need? And so in the short term, that's meant that we've repurposed some of the spaces at Pennine Five to make sure that we can accommodate the growth of some of our University of Sheffield spin-outs. We've converted some offices into labs and created some shared labs. So we're trying to make things happen. We're trying to retain things with the funding that we've got. But from that, we then need to make sure that we create a larger investment opportunity so that we can create a more attractive proposition for the bigger players to come in. And so my priority over the summer is to make sure that we make that case for investment. So we're building on that data, we're working with companies, and so come early next year, we should have a really compelling proposition to present what that future vision looks like for the next 20 years. So it's a real opportunity to engage now, because for me it's a really exciting time.
Thank you so much. So this is the moment where you are going to ask us, I hope, some questions, some positive engagement. Just to say one thing, I'm going to go away tonight having heard Sheffield in Westminster said more times than I've ever heard it before. It's going to be ringing in my ears. Rob, over to you, a question.
Yeah, so, as you know, I've been to Sheffield a number of times. I'm
You
not
have.
from Sheffield, and I'm partly walking today because of spending 6 months in a hospital in Sheffield with the technology and the NHS doctor at the time. But it's just interesting. I've noticed almost all of you, although with the exception of you, talk predominantly about universities, and you did mention colleges, but in terms of individual schemes that are working with you. And you know, given that what you're trying to do is renewal, regeneration, and yes, you've got the universities with requiring all the 3As and all this kind of thing, but none of that is going to happen unless you've got the skilled workers. And just looking at the figures, as well as typing on this thing, Sheffield is behind, Yorkshire is behind the rest of the country in terms of skills and productivity. And I just found it interesting that none of you talked about universities, but you didn't talk about the colleges, you didn't talk about the South Yorkshire Institute of Technology, which is a collaboration of colleges, and the fact that none of this can happen unless you deal with the skills deficit in the region. So this is not a criticism, by the way, it's just interesting to see the way you're thinking. But I think what's the answer to that? Because I don't think you're going to get the renewal and regeneration that you want unless you sell. Because if I just did a list here of all the different skills deficits there are in Sheffield, it's green economy, digital construction. You will know this more than most. So what are you going to do? What's your plans to deal with that, as well as focusing on the macro, the big universities, the 60,000 students with 3As or whatever.
Who would like to take that?
Actually, you won't get your trains unless you've got people to build them.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So I can handle that, Rob. So one of the interesting things I found, of course, but
I'm going to take other questions.
Yeah.
But
I'll kick it off. I'll try and be brief. So one of the things I found interesting when I was at the
we're into
university,
quick fire now.
exactly,
Okay.
University of Sheffield. So one of the exactly. So one of the things that was interesting was they had shut down an entire wing around bioscience because they needed to get Chinese language into the university. This was a consequence of the fact that what the university needs to do is to make money in order to function. So one of the things I think we need to think about is post-secondary, and this will apply to colleges as well. So that's where I'm getting into what you're asking, is what do we want out of colleges, universities, all sorts of post-secondary? I think there was this idea at some point of like, well, let's let the market sort of dictate where this will go. And where the market dictated it will go is Chinese students want English language courses. That's where the market dictated. That probably doesn't actually feed into the skills that like South Yorkshire needs, or indeed probably Manchester or loads of other places need. So that's a broader question that we need to ask ourselves about what we want these institutions to do, is what I would say, and how we fund them.
So this is, I'm just going to say, this is not an answer to the question, but I did sit with Barnsley College this afternoon, who were again in Westminster, which was great. Chris, do you want to come in and Charlotte very quickly? So we're going to be really quick.
I will be.
Snappy.
Robert, you've just done what I did to the team that visited from the Industrial Strategy Unit, because I said, you haven't mentioned skills yet. And they said, ooh. And then I laid out what we were doing, and we're developing a strategy, you're right. And because the question I get asked more than anything else is, if you're going to get all these bioscience and life sciences companies, who's going to work in the labs? Who isn't the high flyers? And so I totally agree with you. We've started with our technical college, but that's not scaling, and so we're trying to kind of reverse engineer for the region that impetus. So totally agree.
Do you want to come in very quickly?
And the benefit of the city working in partnership is that we are working, of course, with the City Council, and as part of that new skills strategy, it's a core part of the modern economy skill set that we need, that these businesses require. And so how do we require what our businesses need with the skill set? We want to ensure that ideas can come from anywhere and from anyone. So actually, how do we inspire the next generation to start a business, but also that they can join one of these businesses? Sheffield, I think, has 87% of its businesses are less than 10 employees. So how do we do that better supply and demand matching, make sure that we can raise the potential vacancies that are available in some of these businesses and lower the barrier to entry for them to join them? So yeah, definitely a core part of what we want to achieve.
It's a big issue though, Rob. Okay.
So just quickly, so I mentioned briefly Sheffield College. So part of their remit, which they're going through now, is to look at skills-based courses. So the part of Sheffield College who are already based at P5 is adult learning. So they're looking right across the piece to try and see how they can fill that. As investors, how we help, and it's frustrating, the funding round for these courses is only 3 years guaranteed. So although you've got Department of Education on the hook, we've got to basically accept a zero vacant possession value to provide the space, which we're very prepared to do. We have unique space, film studios, sound studios, esports facilities let to universities, where there's no real value attached to it, although there is an income stream. So our view is we want to try and create the physical environment to allow people to offer the courses. What could be done a bit better by people who are making the policies is actually think about how they could give some better certainty to these organisations who are delivering the courses. Because there's a very easy succession if one institution fails for another institution to step in and take that over. And we aren't really seeing that being leveraged effectively yet.
Fantastic. Tim, very quickly.
I was lucky enough to have been a student at the university in the mid-1980s when Sheffield was the Soviet Socialist Republic of South Yorkshire under David Blunkett. And one of the things I remember as a student was the amazing bus service. You could go anywhere in the city for 2p or out into the Pennines for 15p. But as a student, I didn't have to pay the massive rates that subsidise that bus service. So my question is a tax question. What is the perfect tax system that allows the government to raise money for schools, health, staffing, more and more for defence, but at the same time encourages you as business people, as entrepreneurs, to grow your business?
Nick, do you want to come? It does sound like a very complicated question, Tim.
It is a very complicated
I'm not sure we're going to deliver the answer immediately on that one.
I have so many thoughts on this, by the way. I mean, for instance, one of my favorite bands of all time is The Fall from Manchester. And one of the things that actually you learning about the history of The Fall is how much they were basically just sort of funded by the dole. Like basically, the musicians, like how there was this whole thing in the 70s and 80s of artists, musicians, whoever, who were on the dole, basically. But then obviously then you say, well, okay, fine. But, then it sort of leads to the abuses of the system and all of that, and also the crushing of the entrepreneurial. How do we find that kind of perfect dovetail of the entrepreneurial spirit and the funding of the arts and the creative that actually leads on to entrepreneurship. And all I would say about that is, yes, it's incredibly complicated, and in fact is at the essence of all political conversation. It is the essence of how do we find the perfect society. I don't have the answer.
This will be a
any more than anyone
discussion,
else.
Tim, for later. Just to say, on a creative level, and I'm going a bit off message, but I'm the chair, so why not indulge me? So on a creative level, I remember some years ago working as the CEO for a charity, and this chap came in. He was a creative. He was clearly a creative. And someone said to me, he's the drummer of the Arctic Monkeys. And I foolishly said, who are the Arctic Monkeys? I didn't go into North Sheffield again. Nick, yours is the final question. We're going to wrap up. Over to you.
Just a quick two-parter. So the first part for Nick. So when you wrote the Jobs Foundation reports, how much of an import of a negative impact did the closure of the Doncaster Sheffield Airport play into the narrative around transportation? I guess second general question to the panel. So if the airport was to open up for the region, how do you sort of get that excitement generated around, connectivity and transport? Can Sheffield use the opening of that airport as kind of a beacon to open up that, logistics and transport for the area?
Before Nick answers, another anecdote, which I think is a substantial anecdote too in relation to Sheffield, is that Sheffield Airport, which is now Doncaster Sheffield, which is about to reopen, was a designated landing site for one of the space shuttles because of the size of the runway, because it was a Vulcan bomber runway in the day. Over to you. A completely ridiculous fact, but it seems sensible at the time.
I love it. It's great. That's great. Well, I'm never going to be. I am passionately pro infrastructure, and I don't like to see airports close. And I think they should stay open. In terms of where I was looking at, in terms of the transportation infrastructure in that part of the world, I was really thinking about. I feel sort of, I'm going on about it, but I really feel like if you could link those northern cities some way that was comprehensible and easy, right, for people. Let's imagine it's 2100, right? And you get to Liverpool to Hull in half an hour. I mean, I agree that's incredibly futuristic, but imagine if you had that. Then suddenly what you would have, if you could get to that point, right? If you could zip around that entire North Corridor, right? Liverpool to Hull, and just zip around. And some of you will know, getting from Leeds to Hull is a nightmare. If you've tried to do it, it's horrible. I've done it, nightmare. Imagine if that was easy, which it really theoretically should be. Then I just feel like everything becomes easy. Actually, in terms of airports, you've got Manchester, you've got Liverpool. If everyone can whiz around the north, then it just transforms everything.
Just another Sheffield anecdote as we wind up. Of course, in winter you can't get to Manchester Airport because you just can't get over the top. It's completely snowed out.
That's completely true.
So we all have to get on the M1 and come down to Heathrow.
Absolutely.
Because it's the only airport that we can get to.
Absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tonight. I'm going to wind up now, if that's okay. Time has passed us by. Can I say to all of you, thank you for coming this evening. It's hugely appreciated on our side, because to come and sit to listen about Sheffield for so long is incredible, and we're grateful for that. But on a serious note, this is an opportunity for us to further this discussion. It really is an important discussion, because if Sheffield and things that the panel and others are doing here, if we move forward on that, then we're going to make a really big impact sub-regionally and indeed, I think, nationally. I'd like to thank the Jobs Foundation, to Georgiana, to Matthew, the President, Lord Elliott. Thank you to the Jobs Foundation, Flora. Thank you for all of your efforts to make sure that we could be here. It's hugely appreciated. And a final thanks to Ken and to Nick and to Charlotte and to Chris, some of whom are going to head off now to face EMR off to Sheffield. I wish you well on that journey. I'm grinning a little because I'm staying overnight in London, but it will be a great journey. Thank you to all of you, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good. Thanks so much. Thank you. Thanks, Ken. Good. Thanks. Really, thanks so much. Great. Good.